Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Williamsburg City Council meeting of Thursday, April 10th. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Williams? Here. Ms. Ramsey?
Here.
Mayor Pons?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Here.
Ms. Kernshear?
Here.
Next is matters of special privilege, and this is an opportunity for us to recognize a city employee. And so, Mr. Lewis, if you'd join me at the podium. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is Micah Lewis, everyone. And Mike, he's elevated the service of the city of Williamsburg since his employment here in March of 2022 as the city's first multimedia designer. Mr. Lewis joined the city's team in a new role and helped define the expectation of excellence as he has achieved it. Described by his teammates as a true team player who collaborates seamlessly, Mr. Lewis made himself a key part of what makes Williamsburg a special place to live and work. His collaborative nature has been evident in many major community efforts. One example is the city's future festivals, where he has been instrumental in bringing larger-than-life games to the neighborhoods for public input in support of the city's strategic planning efforts we call the GIO's Goals, Initiative, and Outcomes. Mr. Lewis's co-workers also said his innovative approach and commitment to excellence drives productivity and positively impacts both the city's operations and the community. These traits can be no more evident in the State of the City address each year. Mr. Lewis is responsible for the cinematography, the editing, and the final cuts of the city's premier event. He has elevated the product from the beginning, never failing to invest in the assignment's success. Each production process, he raises the expectations and successfully communicates the city's goal and vision as well as any other premier production company could. Much of the city's multimedia design work occurs behind the scenes and is rarely credited. However, every citizen now is familiar with and benefits from this creative eye. Designing and redesigning every city publication from weekly newsletters to event flyers and the annual budget, he touches every aspect of the city and brings clarity through clean and appealing design. Mr. Lewis is an outstanding public servant, offering our citizens and visitors his talents, time, and trade. Today, a grateful organization, community, and a family say thank you for a job well done. Mr. Lewis is hereby recognized for his dedications to excellence, which is in keeping to the best traditions of public service here in the city of Williamsburg. We have this for you. We also have a nice little plaque.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'll keep my remarks brief, just to about a half an hour. No, thank you. It's been an honor to work here for the last 3 years. Drew, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here and to work for the city, and I look forward to many more years. So thank you.
Okay, in our packet, we have the minutes from the March 10th meeting, as well as the March 13th meeting. Are there any changes, corrections? Is there a motion to approve?
So I move that we approve the minutes from March 10th and March 13th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Ms. Williams? Aye. Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshear?
Aye.
Okay. Takes us now to public hearings. We have 4 public hearings. 3 of them are related, and so, Mr. City Manager, would you like to do all 3 of those at once, and we'll have a public hearing at the conclusion of the presentation of all 3, or?
That's up to you.
Is that okay with council? Okay. So the first is a public hearing regarding the proposed FY26 budget. The second would be a public hearing regarding the proposed FY26 water rate increase. And the third is a public hearing regarding the proposed FY26 prepared food, beverage, and transient lodging and admission tax increase effective January 1st, 2026. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Trivette.
Thank you, Mayor. So we went through this presentation on Monday, but I'm going to go through it again today and then highlight some of the changes that resulted from our conversation on Monday and some of the suggestions that we've received from City Council over the last few days. So this is our budget process. It shows you how we get from A to B. We really spend a lot of time at the beginning of this process, October through December, identifying what the city needs might be from departments, constitutional officers, and outside agencies. And then we fold that together with our estimates of revenue and decide how much of those things we can actually fund. We're now at April, where we present the budget and begin the process of refining it to meet the City Council's desires, and then hopefully we'll adopt it in May consistent with City Charter. So just a little bit about what a budget is and what it's not. A budget is not a contract. It's just a planning document. The fact that there are things budgeted in the budget, included in the financial plan, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to happen. Most of the things included in the budget particularly are over $1 value that they have to be approved by the City Council before the money can actually be expended. And they come back to you in the form of a contract or a service agreement or whatnot. So this is just the beginning of a journey for many projects, particularly the ones that are forecasted in out years. As I said, they're funded through the council's adoption, so this is just a plan saying that this is a project that we're considering but in no way committed to. So a little bit about this year's budget. FY26, the proposed budget is $112.3 million, and that's divided in our 6 funds. Now, just a little bit about the funds. The general fund is how we budget for the general operations of the city government. The capital improvement projects fund, that's where we budget for major projects. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. The utility fund, obviously, is where we budget for the operations and maintenance of the utility system. And it's interesting because that fund particularly is an enterprise fund, is designed to stand on its own merit, meaning it's supposed to supply its own revenue through its rate structure. The Tourism Development Fund is our newest fund, and that's where we budget money for tourism expenses, hopefully making it a little bit more transparent as to how we're spending the city's tourism collection. The Public Assistance Fund is how we provide funding for human services activities. And then the Quarter Path CDA, our smallest fund, is the fund that supports the real estate development activities at the Community Development Authority for the Quarter Path development. So in this budget, as I said, we begin the process by identifying what the requests are and then matching that to our expected revenues. And when we did that this year, there wasn't a lot left. So as you see at the top, the mandatory spending increase was $2.4 million, and that's essentially what we forecast the revenues to be. We had a little bit of a surplus of $77,000 at the end of that exercise. So most of the requests that were submitted that were new requests were denied. The only new thing that's included in this proposed budget from that list was a 3% cost of living increase for the city staff. All the rest of it that's new money is associated with outside agency requests, contractual agreements, or mandatory spending. So that leaves you with this list of what's not included. The largest request that we received from departments particularly was for staffing. We had a request for over 21.5 FTE positions, and none of those are accommodated in this budget. There are 2 exceptions. There are 2 positions in the utility fund that are funded. The first is a new engineer position, and the second is a fats, oils, and grease inspector that will be funded through the new rates if they are approved. The WRHA funding is a federal funding stream that the City Council has identified for a few years now as something that we'd like to try and wean ourselves off of, and we have not successfully done that in years past nor in this year. As we think about what funding streams might be most susceptible to federal changes, I think that's one of them, so that's certainly something that we need to keep an eye on. We also received requests from some new outside agencies totaling $175,000, and none of those were funded. At this point in the budget's adoption or consideration, there are still a couple of things that we don't know. We don't know for sure how the state funding streams will be handled until the governor approves the budget, and we certainly don't know how the federal funding streams might change. And then there's a couple of other contractual agreements that won't be fully decided until we hear from the state or from James City County. In this budget, we are not asking for a real estate rate increase, but it doesn't mean that real estate assessments didn't increase. In this fiscal year, we're forecasting 4% increase. And as you can see there, that's the rate change over history, including the dollar value that results. So how does that impact the residents, the property owners of the city? You can see that here in the two different ways that those taxes are paid. The first is by mortgage holders paying through their mortgage, and the second is non-mortgage holders that pay twice a year. And as you can see, that 4% increase for most people is not a huge change. There are two things that we have been wrestling with our budget for quite a few years. Seems like every year since I've been with the city, we have talked about this in one form or another. The first is addressing our aging utility infrastructure. And we're at a point now where we really need to put some money into the utility to allow us to make some significant improvements. We've broken down those improvements into three categories: manufacturing the water, distributing the water, and then the pump stations to circulate the water. That total is $27.6 million to be spent over the next 10 years. Now, that's our best estimate of how that work will go. What we'd like to do is do that with a combination of contractors and in-house work, which means that as we go through the work plan, it'll either be faster or slower than we expect. Now, our concept here is to fund that through debt for the utility, and we would take that debt on as we're able to take on the project. So there's no forecast that we're going to issue a big bond next year. We're going to take it slow and see what we can get done piece by piece. The second issue is a CIP structural imbalance. As I said earlier, the CIP is where we budget for those big projects. So there's a qualification and criteria to be included. You have to have a significant lifespan for the project, program, or building, and it has to be over a certain dollar value. A lot of people, I think that the capital improvement fund is only construction projects, and that's certainly not the case. There's a lot of expensive equipment. There's contractual upgrades that are budgeted year over year in the plan, and also some programming. The typical approach to the CIP for the city of Williamsburg has been to fund it through surplus budgeting and sales tax. So the first run of defense is the sales tax generates the money, it goes into the CIP, and it pays for expenses. Some years the sales tax is not sufficient, and so we do a transfer from the general fund to the CIP to balance that budget. And that works well when there's a surplus in the general fund. But over the last few years, City Council has asked us to be more precise in our budgeting in the general fund, and revenues have slowed down, which produces less of a surplus at the end of the year, making the CIP harder and harder to balance, particularly when we are looking at big expenses. So we've been looking for ways to improve the flow of revenue to the CIP. In 22, we proposed a real property tax increase to help address this problem. It was not approved in full, and then we offset that need in those years by applying some COVID relief funds that allowed us to postpone action on this. Unfortunately, those funds will be exhausted in the coming fiscal year, and so we need to address it now. So how are we going to meet this challenge? The staff proposed three essential veins to do that, strategies. The first is to constrain spending. And so we went through the capital improvement plan, and we removed $30 million worth of projects over the 10-year or over the 5-year horizon of the plan. $15.3 million of those were from the FY26 budget. Now that includes new projects that were submitted this year as part of the budgeting process, but it also includes a whole host of projects that were previously budgeted and the money either not fully expended or the project not underway yet. And so we reclaimed that fund, that money back to help balance the budget. We also went through the departmental operating request and removed $725,000 in planned spending. The way that we did that was we looked at every single discretionary line and compared it to 25, 24, and 23 spending, and then backed down the request based on what we saw from actuals. We then circulated that with the departments to make sure that they thought they could hit those targets, and we believe that we can. And then the last thing that we did was implement a funding freeze on 9 positions through the end of the fiscal year, which gives us $207,000 to finish the year strong that then gets applied to the next fiscal year's balance. We also suggested using one-time funds the city still has available to it. We have $5.5 million in assigned COVID relief funds that could be made available to help balance the budget at the end of the year, as well as an additional $1 million in the reserve fund of the city that exceeds the policy for the reserve. So I think that that's a smart use of those funds. The way that we would do it is at the end of the year, wherever there is a shortfall, if there is one, we would deploy that money to cover the gap. Unfortunately, those two strategies alone are not sufficient to meet the need, and so we also propose some improved revenue streams. The first, as we talked about, was to raise the water rate by $1.59 per 1,000 gallons for the users. That produces $1.5 million new money to the fund and will allow us to proceed with those plans. Separate from that, to deal with the deficiencies in the CIP, we propose 3 additional revenue streams. The first is to increase the mills tax by 2%, which would generate $1.8 million, and 3% on the lodging tax, which generates an additional $1.1, and implement a 10% admissions tax, which we believe would generate about $1.25 million for the city. So what is an admissions tax? Since this is a new tax, this is a question that we get asked a lot. It's a tax that's applied to admission to an event. So if you're going to something that charges admission, you would be paying this tax. We've proposed it to be 10%. It's paid by the patron and not the organization. So the person buying the ticket pays the tax. And it's applied to the sale price of the ticket. The state does prohibit that this tax cannot be applied to university-sponsored events. If you go to look at the state code that enables admissions tax, it allows that to happen. But there was an attorney general's opinion some years later that clarified that the localities of the state are not eligible to tax the state. And so that's how that's applied. And then the council, of course, has the ultimate authority to change this recommendation, particularly as it relates to admissions tax, because you can set the rate based on the class of organization, you can reduce the rate, you can even tax or cap the taxable amount. So there's a lot of flexibility with how you might implement an admissions tax. So just a little bit about the utility needs and how we're planning to address it. This is a chart that shows you the historic water rates of the city. And I think the most notable thing is that beginning in 2000, probably earlier than that, there was a small incremental adjustment in the rate every single year to adjust for the cost rises in providing the service. In 2017, that practice was suspended and was not picked back up. If you extended out the rate trend that we were looking at by those incremental increases, we would actually be higher than the rate that's being recommended today as part of this budget. So we are recommending to increase the rate 30%, that $1.59 per 1,000 gallons, to achieve the spending in the utility fund that we think is necessary over the next few years to deal with those deficiencies and make some improvements. So what does that mean to the user, the $1.59 rate increase? We looked at residential, and the average bill would increase by $6.36 per month. And on the commercial side, we used a median because on the lower end, a lot of commercial customers are paying the minimum amount. And on the upper end, we do have some users that use an exponential amount of water. And so just looking at the more common group, it's a 28.62 per month increase for the commercial user. The regional utility rates, if you look at that, you can see that we still, even with this rate increase, are one of the lowest in the region. It's important to understand that this is very difficult to compare because every utility charges their rates differently. Some people have a pipe fee, some people have, there's just a lot of different ways to do this. So it's hard to compare. One of the things that also makes it difficult is understanding the water rate versus the sewer rate. So the city has water lines and sewer lines. But with the sewer lines, all we're doing is collecting the sewage. Then we send it to HRSD who treats it. And so built into our rate is the amount of money required to maintain the sewer lines as well. HRSD sends its own bill to most localities for treatment. Right now, the city shares that bill. In the future, though, we will split that out. And so we will begin to function like most of the localities in Hampton Roads with separate bills from HRSD. Then the second issue is balancing the CIP, and you can see here this illustrates the problem that we've been dealing with. The CIP balances itself when you just look at the governmental projects, but when you start to fold in the education projects and required reserves, what you see is that there's not enough money in the fund by a considerable amount. And so looking at strategies to address that, we did look at a whole host of solutions, and these are certainly not all the ones we considered. But you can see there on the right all the different improved revenue streams that were considered, even including a trash and recycling fee. Most localities in the state do charge for trash and recycling as a pass-through to the customer. We don't do that. And then, of course, looking at varying amounts of real estate tax increase, and then ultimately what we recommended, which was to increase the meals and institute admissions tax and increase the lodging taxes to generate the revenues that we need. The rationale behind selecting those three is really very simple. For one, it's the only way to have an optional tax. And the second reason, probably the most important, is that it's the only way for us to share those expenses that are driven by the larger group of folks that come to visit the city with those visitors. Just raising the real estate tax or implementing a trash and recycling fee doesn't provide that opportunity. So we presented this on Monday and had a good conversation with the city council, lots of comments from the citizens, and we made some changes based on what was a consensus opinion. Here they are. First, we reduced the expenditures for FY26 by eliminating the Children's Park planned debt. We eliminated the African American Heritage Trail art funding. We split comp plan funding over 2 fiscal years. We further adjusted the paving schedule in the plan. We eliminated restoration of the Waller Mill Bike Trail. We also postponed new restrooms at Quarter Path Park. That allowed us to make some revenue changes. So we lowered our mills tax recommendation by 0.5%. We lowered the lodging tax by 1%. We added some admissions tax exemptions and also increased what we had planned as a dealer discount to 2% for all 3 tax categories. So when you apply that, this is the new outlook for the CIP's future projects. And so as you can see, we still remain balanced for all 5 years of the plan, which was our goal. So I think we're definitely headed in the right direction. And I think this represents a good review of the capital plan. So where do we go from here? We still have a journey to take. We've got to get to May for adoption of the budget. And so there are plenty of opportunities for us to continue to make revisions to the plan. And I hope that you all will continue to review the budget and let us know if you find things you'd like to see adjusted. The opportunities for public feedback, of course, today for the public hearings. May the 5th at the work session, we will go over the budget again and any changes that have been made since today. And then hopefully be ready for adoption at the May 8th regular meeting. We're happy to answer any questions.
Good, thank you. Drew, just one question, because it's an add to this presentation that we didn't have Monday, and it's new to our city businesses. Can you explain maybe a little bit more about what a dealer discount is?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yes, a few months ago, we had a local restaurateur come and speak to city council and ask us to consider adjusting our meals tax collection to accommodate for what they have to pay on credit card fees for credit card companies. So every restaurant selects a credit card vendor, they process their credit cards through that vendor, and that vendor sets a rate that they add to the bill that charges for their service. And so it's standard practice in most taxing localities to offer a dealer discount, including at the state level. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to offer this dealer discount to offset those credit card fees that are being processed by hotels, restaurants, and soon to be admissions tax collectors.
You know, and it just makes sense to me, because the tax that the restaurants, hotels, or purveyors collect from the customer is just a pass-through to the city, but the proprietor has to pay a discount fee on that money. And so really it's a double whammy against them. So being able to provide a dealer discount is appropriate. And I know that the state does it and other municipalities do that. So yes. I don't have any other questions, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. Just appreciate the responsiveness to suggestions from all of city council as we continue to dive into the budget and try to find ways to save money. In these economic times, it's really tight for everyone. We realize that, so we'll continue to navigate our way through the budget to try to identify additional ways to maybe reduce some further spending.
Yeah, I don't have any questions either, but definitely thank you for the quick turnaround on things since Monday. And I really do encourage folks to take a look at even the presentation on Monday and the discussion, we had a really good discussion, I think, on Monday in the work session about the budget. And, this is representative of what we're seeing today is representative of, listening and some feedback that we're able to incorporate and discuss today. And certainly to echo the Vice Mayor that, we still have time going forward. So encouraging everybody to stay informed and to follow along and to let us know what you're thinking. And this is really helpful today with these changes. Thanks.
Any questions? Because we'll open the public hearing, then we'll come back for some more comments.
No, the only question I had was on the dealer discount, which you've talked about.
I have no further questions, thank you.
All right, with that, I do have a number of speakers cards. But after we conclude the speakers cards, if you wish to come up, please do so. First one I have is Mr. Wilson.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Wilson, 22 The Palisades. I won't repeat my comments and suggestions that I made in my email to you yesterday, but I'll clarify and add a couple items. First of all, I was at the City Council work session on Monday, and my clear understanding was that you directed the city to remove the Peacock Hill Children's Park from the budget. And the only thing I saw today was $270,000 in interest on the debt. If in fact we see that that $6.5 million remains in the capital plan for the budget next year, there's going to be a lot of angry people because we will feel that there was kind of a bait and switch on us in terms of what was discussed at the meeting on Monday and what we're hearing today in the budget. Second, one clarification. In my email, I talked about the Historic Triangle Recreational Fund Authority Executive Director. I was at the December meeting when you approved the city hiring an executive director on the basis that you would get a more qualified candidate hiring the director on the city's payroll rather than the HTRFA's payroll. But it was represented by the city that would be fully reimbursed, at least in the first year, by the HTRFA. In fact, this budget has over $200,000 for that individual, but the reimbursement is only at $75,000. Again, another case of bait and switch, where you say something is represented and approved in December, and yet the budget comes out and it's represented differently. Third item is kind of a new item. With the completion of the police station together with the fire station, the city will spend over $40 million on these buildings and outfitting them. Spreading that cost over 25 years would cost about $1.6 million annually. The annual cost in the budget for the fire and police services is $13 million. So together, we pay $14.6 million for the annual cost for the city to provide fire and police services. Now, William & Mary has over $900 million in real estate on which they pay no real estate tax to the city. This represents 20% of the total appraised real estate in the city. The Town and Gown report estimated 62% of William & Mary students live in the city, representing about 40% of our population. If you consider the percentage of real estate that William & Mary represents, then 20% of that $14.6 million cost of fire and police services would be a fair reimbursement to the city for these services, or about $1.5 million a year. If you consider the percent of the total population that William & Mary students represent, then the reimbursement would be much more. The current budget suggests that emergency services agreement with William & Mary, where they reimburse the city for emergency services, is less than $195,000. Virginia State Code provides authority for state universities to reimburse localities for emergency services. So given the situations the city is in, doesn't it make sense that the city should re-engage with William & Mary to provide an increased cost of providing those services to the city, and a new discussion about a fair payment from the college should be engaged in? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker's card I have is Ms. Noreen Graziano. My apologies to your son.
It's easy to mix this up.
Long story.
Thank you, Honorable City Manager, Mayor Pons, and the honorable members of City Council for your time and consideration. My name is Noreen Graziano. I am the current president of the Williamsburg Area Restaurant Association. We are a nonprofit organization that was established in 1999, many of whom members are here today. The association supports and promotes the economic interests of nearly 100 local restaurants. I am also a city business owner who would be affected by the proposed meals tax increase and water increase. Both the Restaurant Association and my business are opposed to the current increases. Local restaurants are already faced with rising food prices, increased spending for staff, decreased visitation, and increased credit card fees. Currently, restaurateurs are absorbing the credit card fees, so we are very grateful to see that dealer discount. With an increase in meals tax, these fees will also increase. Some restaurants do not add that to the bill. Patrons of the restaurants are both locals and tourists. We feel increasing the meals tax by 1.5% to 3% will drive locals out of visiting city restaurants and could result in decreased visitation. We all know the common goal in this room is increasing visitation. Restaurateurs are repeatedly asked about taxes on a customer's receipt. In a time of such uncertainty, we understand budget shortfalls, but feel these shortfalls could come from other sources and should be revisited. Let's raise the taxes where the taxes are the lowest. The current real estate and personal property taxes are among the lowest in the area. I believe that City Council should explore alternative revenue-generating strategies such as more efficient budget allocation, reducing unnecessary expenses, or seeking state or federal funding where possible. While I understand the importance of maintaining essential public services, we must do so in a way that does not disproportionately burden businesses who contribute to the vibrancy of the community. Thank you so much for your time.
Next speaker's card I have is Ms. Carolyn Murphy.
Not speaking that much today.
Welcome. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Carolyn Murphy, 221 Yorkshire Drive. Mayor and members of council, I want to speak today on the budget items other than the park and the library I spoke about on Monday. I recommend City Council review the following in the budget. In the non-departmental budget, the contingency item is $500,000. The personal contingency item is $654,000+. No money was used in those line items in the last couple of years, so these line items should be eliminated or greatly reduced. If the current 9 positions are frozen until the end of this budget cycle, one has to ask if they are needed. If not filled in FY26 budget, existing employees are not eliminated in the future, and it has a potential of a savings of $900,000 with salary and benefits. In FY20, the city had 206.5 employees. With the 26 budget, with the addition of 2 employees, we have 242.5 employees. That's 36 new people since FY20. The manager notes in his budget message that 21.5 positions were not included in the budget this year at a cost of $1.9 million. If you have those, that's a total of 264 employees in the future if they're filled. This equals to just under 6 cents a tax rate increase. What has changed in the city that warrants adding additional employees? We are still a tiny community with 9 square miles. How can we sustain that amount of increase? The FY26 budget indicates departmental expense in the operating budget of 57%. Adding additional employees only increases that percentage and puts additional strain on future budgets. Remember, salaries cost, they never go away, they only increase each year. It also means we have to find space to house those employees, which means more capital expense in renovations or new buildings. Sometimes you just have to say no, and it's a want and not a need. If the answer is we have additional projects that need staff to manage, then we need to prioritize projects to the staff we currently have and prioritize projects to those needed for the city and not once for the city. If you're pulling money from ARPA and reserves to balance this year's budget, which is not going to be sustainable in the future, then the fiscal responsible decision should be to reduce the budget. Keep in mind that projects and expenditures should be prioritized for the needs of the city, with wants being reduced or eliminated. We have to balance our personal budgets at home, and the city should also. One question I have is, why is the African American Heritage Trail sculpture not funded through the city's arts program? It seems like it would meet the criteria for that. Why is there no CIP sheet for the $600,000 comprehensive plan update? Unless you carefully read the spreadsheet, you will not know if the large amount of money is being spent. This is an incredible amount of money for an update when the last 3 comprehensive plans have been completed by city staff, with the PDC updating the economy and population sections for a nominal cost. The city planning department currently has the same staff numbers as those who completed the previous plans. The travel budget line item needs to be reviewed for departments with a prioritization given to development opportunities within Virginia and the U.S., and administrative regulations and procedures need to be adopted that encourage per diem expenses and avoid travel outside of the country. The professional service line has a total of over $500,000 in departmental budgets and needs to be reviewed and justified. Are the 6 electric vehicles for the police department replacing existing vehicles? If not, and it was for the 6 offers not funded this year, then that's a savings of $600,000. And why has the water budget request increased by over $300,000 this year? In closing, in the future, if a tax rate increase is necessary, it should be for necessary core city services and not for wants, especially if we have to borrow for these wants. We need to focus on maintaining the infrastructure we have rather than adding to it and not maintaining what we currently have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Next speaker's card I have is a combination of Tom Powers and Mary Ellen Powers. Welcome. If you just state your name and address for the record, please. Keep your comments to about 5 minutes.
Thank you, City Manager and members of the City Council. My name is Mary Ellen Power. I'm here with my brother Tom Power. We co-own the Cheese Shop, Fat Canary, downstairs at Fat Canary, and our wine cellar. As business owners in Williamsburg, we respectfully express our very strong opposition to the proposed increase to the meals tax, lodging tax, and the newly created 10% admissions tax proposed in fiscal year 2026. Our family-owned business opened in 1971. We're blessed with much success over the course of our first 50 years. But like everyone else, we were very adversely affected by the COVID pandemic 5 years ago. Nationally, 19% of independent restaurants never opened after COVID. To this day, our business is still in recovery mode. The Cheese Shop is open 6 days a week. We'd rather be open 7 days a week. We close at 6 p.m. We'd rather stay open until 8 p.m. Fat Canary is able to be open 5 nights a week. We'd like to be open 7 nights a week. Since COVID, we cannot fully operate our business. Why? We're still challenged to achieve full staffing. We have 68 employees. Prior to COVID, we had over 85. The employees that we do have are challenged to find parking, but that's another subject. The current economy is filled with uncertainty. Every cost of doing our business is getting more expensive. Meanwhile, we see our customers becoming more cost-conscious. It's our fear that increasing taxes on locals and visitors alike will have a negative impact on the foot traffic that small local businesses need to survive in this town. It's our hope that we could be looking at ways to increase attendance, to increase business. But raising and adding taxes will not do that. Finally, we would like to see the city propose ways in which raising tax revenues is shared burden across the entire community, not just the local hospitality business community. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker card I have, Mel-XXX. I'm not sure. I can't read the name. Well, I'll skip it and come back if I miss you. The next one is Mickey Shohan. That one I can read. Welcome, sir.
At least you know it, huh?
Never forget it.
Well, yeah, there you go. Well, Mickey Chohan, 129 Berkeley Lane, also taxpayer at 142nd Street. Tommy Mary Ellen, nicely done. So much of what I had to say today, and thank you for the opportunity to address you, Mayor and City Council members, got changed up because the whole program got changed up. I don't know when you found out about it, but I found out about it when it was being announced, some of the newer parameters for Monday. It's kind of hard to keep up with things. During the December's City Council meeting, I asked Council if they would review the inequities of the credit card fees, and you have done so, and I appreciate hearing what was said then. Just a couple extra comments and remarks. So the first time that I caught wind of the budget coming out was April 2nd, 8 days ago, with the Virginia Gazette's public announcement. And to increase meal tax by 2%, that left 8 days to kind of get before you now, and it's changed again. So it's a little difficult to keep up with the current information. I failed to catch what was the dealer discount that city manager had mentioned in the slide. It was 2%? Okay. All right. Well, since now the new numbers are before us, that excuse my analogy, but the math would tell you that if you increase 2%, then, as I was thinking now, 1.5%, so you're increasing the meal tax collected, which means those discount fees or the fees that we're paying are going to increase because we're having to pay more for more that we're collecting. Kind of makes sense. So I don't know what the delta of what that real discount point is, because it's not as good as it would have been had it be under the old regime. So some of those calculations are skewed, but at the end of the day, under a format of what I had with it going to 2% and a 1% discount fee, it actually meant that we were not losing exactly in our situation, because I know our numbers would be $4,500 a year paying for the privilege to submit my meal tax, but it would reduce it down now to $3,000. So yes, we've made some improvements, but still, why am I paying to collect your money? It doesn't make sense. The city doesn't do it. When I go to pay my bill here, you collect the full freight of the fee. Why am I collecting or having to be burdened with any of it? It's a little bit of the analogy of I'm collecting $100 for you in tax. The charge at the restaurant's $100. So at 2.5%, I'm billed $2.50. I understand. But adding now the extra burden of the additional tax dollars, it increases that collection dollar amount beyond what really I'm going to collect and get returned back to me. I know that back in the budget days, when I served on city council, navigating the work on the budget requires tremendous discipline of what really is fair and just. And as what has said before, I don't know as if this is equally spread around for all those people that are participating on it. It was a good presentation about the awareness of what's happening with the college and what they pay for with all the services they're made afforded. But you have some tough decisions to make before you. I know in our restaurants when we have difficult and challenging times, and right now those are one of them. I can tell you what we did last year is nowhere near where we're at first quarter. If you measure first quarter this year to first quarter last year, how many restaurateurs in here say they're down in sales? So knowing that, why would we add additional burden to the machine, the golden goose that's laying the egg? Why would we burden ourselves with more stress? You know, we as restaurateurs, we tighten our belts and we hunker down and we get more creative. We don't raise the menu prices. Is anyone raising the menu prices right now in your restaurants?
John, if you can just address council.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone's raising their menu prices.
Keep your comments to the council.
Yep. Okay. So, anyway, to say it's unfair that our other localities, we would be raising our meal tax from 12% up to 14%, where James City County is 11% and York County is 11%. And you ask yourself the question, why we consider raising meal taxes if the other localities can do it at 11%? Is there something being mismanaged, or is there something being done that's not handled properly? Why can they do it and we can't do it? I will point out that property tax in James City County is 83 cents, York County 77 cents, and in the city of Williamsburg 62 cents. There's something there. I would also, getting to a close and coming to it, property taxes is something that we all pay. I pay it residentially. I also pay it commercially. It's said, and others have mentioned, that perhaps council doesn't have an appetite to do that because it's the voter that they're actually putting this on. And also, it may be a self-imposed tax for yourselves that you don't want to receive and pay for, either business-wise or residentially.
You can wrap up.
Don't mind putting that on to.
Gone over 5 minutes.
Pardon me?
You're over.
My 5 minutes to Mr. When you couldn't read.
Well, you can't do that, but if you can just wrap up, should make
Yep,
that.
okay, certainly. The buzzword that you guys use in the budget is courageously leading. And I think you need to instruct the city manager to find deeper cuts and solicit maybe potentially an outside agency to look subjectively at the budget and make some other recommendations. I would first think there's some deeper cuts, services and programs that can take a haircut. Thinking outside the box, hey, why don't you generate more meal tax by enticing more restaurants to do business in the city of Williamsburg? Red Lobster is a great example of that. Backfilling those locations. I'm certain that location would be $175,000 in taxes as well that they would generate.
You're 2 minutes over, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You know how this works.
Yes. Courageously leading doesn't mean hold your breath and voting for the unfair tax that will negatively impact the golden goose. Courageously leading does not mean continuing to follow the herd and feeding bad policy of overspending with more bad policy of overtaxing. The last thing I'll leave on is city council cannot tax the city into prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody else like to come forward?
I'm Neil Griggs from Kashan on 2nd in Moody's Kitchen, and I want to reiterate what Mary Ellen said. I've been here 10 years, and once COVID hit, it's a brand new ball game in this town. And I never, prior to COVID, worried about sales. I worried about supporting the restaurant and doing the service. Now I am worried about sales on a daily basis. Daily basis. We're being hit with these tariffs. We're being hit with the food chain is attacking us. We're being attacked from every angle there is, taking our margins away. We're going to work for the city council. We're going to work for the city soon. And like he said, you're going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. I never thought to see the number of people in the streets and attendance in this town that go down on a yearly basis, and that people look at these tickets in the restaurant and go, holy crap. But particularly when we sell catering. We sell a banquet in my banquet room for $125, and you tack on the taxes to that, all of a sudden it goes to this 22% tax, and it's out here. At some point, it's going to have to stop. It's not a good image when you look at these things, and every single increase is food and beverage tourist related. Doesn't look good. And I don't mean any offense, but I think there needs to be people in the industry up there, at least one, representing our industry, since it is a tourist town. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Somebody else like to come forward? Yes, come on up. I knew if I waited long enough, I'd get another hand. Welcome, sir. Just state your name.
Council.
Name and
My name's
address for
Andrew
the
Voss.
record.
Yeah, thank you. I live at 365 Mallory Place in James City County. Sorry, I don't pay any property tax as it relates to residential. Plenty of commercial, and certainly plenty of food and beverage tax. We own and operate Against the Grain Restaurant Group, which owns and operates 4 restaurants here in town. We pay as a company around $500,000 a year in total food and beverage tax to the city itself. Increasing these base rates up to 2%, one of my old great directors of finance used to tell me you can't bring percentages to the bank. You bring dollars and cents to the bank, and while I appreciate there's a shortfall in the budget, for us, trying to bring percentages to the bank doesn't necessarily work. We need butts and seats, and if butts and seats decide that they want to go to James City County, York County, Richmond proper, anywhere other local municipality that might have a food and beverage tax that's maybe lower or not at all existent, and they're going to choose to go there. Certainly the locals will, and those individuals traveling in town, they're going to be more cognizant of how they're spending their money. So it might be the same amount of butts that we had in seats last year if we're lucky, but they might not be spending the same amount of money, or they might choose to be spending less because of what these menu prices are, because of what our commodity rates are and what we have to continue to increase in charges for, but then also obviously the tax piece. And we get asked on our taxes on a regular basis, why they're so high. And I do recognize that Hampton itself has a higher prepared food and beverage tax than we do as a local municipality, but I also can say, without digging against Hampton, not a lot of people are going down there to eat downtown. And is it their tax rates? Maybe, maybe not, but it also pushes restaurateurs that might want to otherwise develop in those areas to other municipalities where they're not going to be taxes heavy. So again, as we talked about developing an environment where it's beneficial for restaurateurs to come in and do business here, that is what we need now. And the easy button of just strap it onto the restaurants because we know that, well, if tourists are coming in town, they have to eat, the restaurants will bear the burden. It's clear that based on Carolyn Murphy's comments earlier, if you're not listening to those, I mean, she's been probably more in tune with the budget fiscal responsibility of this stuff and her experience with the city than anyone, and pointed out many opportunities that you could look to other than strapping on yet another burden on the racks of the restaurant. So a lot of great comments being offered. I'm not saying anything that hasn't already been said. I would just urge you strongly to really reconsider where you're looking for this shortfall. There's many other opportunities in city administration where it could probably be found. So,
Thank you, sir. Anybody else like to come forward? Welcome. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Joy Abed from Layaka French Restaurant. I was here all those years ago with a few of you guys when the restaurant tax got raised, and the reason was so you wouldn't have to raise our property taxes. Now, how long ago? Maybe a year? Anybody know? The property taxes are raised. Now we're here today again with an increase in our restaurant taxes again. And I find it appalling at these times that the things that are in the budget just don't seem as necessary. $6 million for a Wade Park and the place that it's going. It's really, from what I understand and what I've read, it's not even supposed to go there for the Colonial Williamsburg's restrictions. And also, it's for something that cannot even be used all year round. The other thing, I'd like to see the breakdown on $39 million for a library. And also, my understanding is that York and James City are supposed to participate in that funding. And they also have in their budget for their own libraries. And they also don't show budgeted money going to y'all, from what I've read. Is that correct? Did anybody answer that?
I'm not sure what you read.
Okay, I
We're not gonna
read
get
that
into
in the upcoming budgets for York and James City, that there's no plans for them to participate in the funding of Williamsburg's library. I know it was Williamsburg, James City, but James City is planning on having their own library at that complex over there where they're at. And my understanding was that there was no money in the budget for the Williamsburg, James City County Library from them, coming from James City or coming from York. And also, how can it cost $39 million? There are all of those concerns. I think it's time that we should be pulling in the belt and not going with all these unnecessary expenditures. I mean, maybe not buying a new Tesla or the big SUV I saw the other day when one police officer was in it. I mean, a Ford Honker Expedition running around the city with one person in it. What is the value in that vehicle? There isn't value. It's expensive. And I just think it's time to relook, because you can't depend on the restaurants. You're going to be putting them out of businesses because less and less people are going to come in. I've already heard from several people that they will dine outside of the city instead of dining in. So I don't think I have anything else to say. I'm sure some of you have said it before, but I got caught up at work because my manager was sick. So we're always covering, we spend a lot of hours trying to run successful businesses in this town. So I just think that even during the pandemic, I felt like the promotions were going in the beginning to Tony Williamsburg, Busch Gardens, the big guys. I don't think that y'all do enough for the restaurants and the music venues. And we already have that huge expenditure with the sports complex. From all indications from other areas, that's a money pit. There are all those things that should be considered. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you for your comments. Would anybody else? Yes, sir. Please come to the microphone if you wish to speak. Welcome, sir. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
John Hall, H-A-L-L, resident of the city of Williamsburg. I realize after listening to all the conversation that this meeting and conversation is all about, mainly about numbers. Well, I was raised with numbers. I was tutored with numbers. I studied numbers for many years as a younger person. But I came today to leave two words and one phrase with City Council. The two words are reasonable and affordable, and the phrase is cost of living. I realize this is the wrong place and the wrong venue and the wrong day and the wrong time of the day and the wrong week to talk about things, but I wanted to leave those two words and that phrase with the City Council. I also talked to a local local establishment owner last week who told me that if I came to city council this week, please mention or state or say in public, the small businesses, including restaurants and other small businesses, are not flourishing financially, operational businesses. They are in business, but they're not flourishing financially, they're not flourishing business-wise. So those 3 words I would like to live city council, and I may or may not come back some other day to talk about something else.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, City Council. I'm here talking about a budget.
Just state your name and address for the record,
Oh,
please.
I'm Jane Marvin. I moved to Williamsburg in 1970. Before that, I attended William and Mary. I've been a very long-time resident, seen a lot of changes. But I want to address the budget issue regarding the widening of Lafayette Street. First of all, as an owner of a house on Lafayette Street that would definitely be affected, I would hope to get a letter or an email notification that I could be losing my yard, maybe even my house, to eminent domain. In my mind, why in the world would you want a major highway there anyway? Bypass Road has been widened and large pedestrian crosswalks have been installed. It runs right by the new multi-purpose building. I feel you are going to ruin the beautiful nature of downtown Williamsburg. You can already walk anywhere you want. I object to the high-density dwellings that they're talking about for the downtown area. I've never liked Midtown Row. My friends call it the Lego apartments. We have been restricted so much by the architectural rulings of the city, what we can do with our houses, even replacing a window, and that you would go so out of the box with these things that are not in keeping with the colonial feel of the area that everybody travels to this area to see and enjoy. I think expansion is okay, but not downtown. I think Lafayette Street could be, maybe more creative thinking could go into that, like maybe take 6 feet on each side and put bike lanes in, make the sidewalks wide and inviting. These are improvements that could be made and still get that connectivity that you want without totally destroying Lafayette Street. I think you could take out the parking lane on Lafayette Street. The owners would have to make arrangements to park on their property. Many of those properties on Lafayette Street, including mine, we have driveways and garages, so that's not an issue for me. Let's see. And talking about the money issues, I'd just like to add, a lot of cities do charge for trash pickup and recycling. In the county, of course, we pay for it ourselves. That would be an easy thing for the city to change if you really need that much money right away. And I think it was shocking today to hear about the tax imposition on the restaurants. It makes food really too expensive and families will go elsewhere. So I really hope you adjust that. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming. Welcome, sir. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Steve Sealing, and the owner of Aromas at 431 Prince George Street. I want to reiterate many of the things that all the other restaurateurs have said today, but I wanted to point out some of the things with, as far as taxes, what we already pay. We pay for a business license, which goes against all of our revenues. We have to pay, if we serve alcohol, we have to pay for an ABC license to ABC. We also have to pay a tax to the city on that. We then have to pay, you're looking to increase the water taxes. That's going to affect every single restaurant here. We have to pay for the meals tax. These are all these things that are piled up on it. Like everyone else has said, since COVID, we're nowhere close to where we were before. We have not recovered yet. We got, money from the federal government, and that helped. But that money's gone, and now we're looking at our budgets and going, what are we going to do? And I know many of the other restaurateurs are in the same situation, and looking to increase taxes on our customers who, if they go away, we're done. We can't operate without the customers. And with the prices going up, credit card fees, we just got reassessed by our credit card company. It basically doubled our rates. So, these are just all these fees that are piling on restaurants, and it's not sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steeling. Welcome, Ms. Fairbanks. Just state your name and address, please.
Sabrina Fairbanks, 119 Berkeley Lane, and multiple other addresses in the city. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about the budget, taking a little bit of a different angle. I still have many opinions about where you can tighten the belt, but I'd like to talk to you about revamping the process by which you create the GIOs, which lead to future CIP projects and the tax burden that they put on residents and businesses. I represent a group of people, about 200 of us, who collectively have lost our trust in our city management and their staff. It really seems to us that they are the true architects of expensive capital improvement projects. We feel like in some ways we've been misled, and you may have been misled with data from these national community surveys, the future festivals, and the GIO public input surveys, which we call the future festival surveys. Why do we feel this way? In 2022, our city management and staff created what are now the infamous award-winning future festivals and the accompanying GIO survey, which is used for planning purposes. I think many citizens here would be shocked to learn the city included survey responses from 291 people who do not live in the city. 385 of the respondents either lived on campus or were somehow connected to the college. We were estimating in the low 80s of people who are not related to the college and who live in the city. Why is this important? It doesn't appear that the survey results were based on the 4,333 resident and business owners who pay property taxes. Fast forward to future festivals and surveys 2024. Still problematic. Some of these survey questions were based on the flawed 2022 surveys. Why continue to spend tax dollars on supplies and staff time to solicit feedback from non-residents, which is exactly what the city staff did? And they defended it by saying, well, we put those surveys on a different color piece of paper. I mean, that's nice, but our tax dollars still paid for the paper and staff time to do this. And the question is, when they knew that the citizens thought it was a problem, why did they do it again? I would believe that citizens here would also be shocked to learn that we were solicited by the city to fill out the online surveys. And because most of us don't go to the free hot dog events, out in the park. And so I personally solicited the group to do this. They want our input. It's all good. And come to find out that they did not use the online survey results in the data that was presented to you for planning purposes. So we've got to ask the question, why ask us for our feedback when you're not going to use the information? So fast forward to today and my second reason to be here, and that is that I think you're trying to figure out how to pay for these CIP projects and which ones to pay for. I feel like dating back, if they're based on flawed data, that you need to take them out of the budget, and not just take them out of this year's budget, remove them. And if we come up with a better system of getting information from the taxpayers, at least include all of us in it, then if they want to bring them up again, let's talk about it in the future. But some of these are based on bad data, and they're very expensive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fairbanks. Mr. Braxton, would you like to speak?
He already has.
Anybody else? Once, twice? All right, we'll close the public hearing and come back to council for some conversations. And I'll just open it up and thank everyone for coming and sharing your thoughts, your experience, particularly as entrepreneurs in the city of Williamsburg. As you know, I've spent a lifetime in the hotel business, and I understand the impact of taxation. So it's not falling on deaf ears, those things that you share with us. I know since Monday, this council has worked diligently, independently, in small groups, no more than 2 at a time, but spent a lot of time with staff to find ways that we can make additional cuts. And so I think that process will, not that I think, I know that process will continue as we head towards May. And so my phone's available, call me, be happy to listen some more, but we can find some additional ways to make some cuts and adjustments. We're here to do that. So those are my only comments regarding this. I don't have any specific directive to staff at this point. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I would just like to say the same, just echo what the mayor said. Appreciate everybody that's reached out, either phone calls or emails or speaking here in person today. And I assure you it doesn't fall on deaf ears. I know for me, I've gone, since we received this manual, I've gone to bed with this manual, and I've woken up with this manual, trying to find ways that we can cut spending within the city, and we don't want anybody to be burdened, businesses, our residents, or anyone. There's certain things in the CIP projects that I commented on Monday that are contracts or equipment that if we pass those things off now, we're going to end up in a situation like we do with the water, that we have a lot of maintenance and infrastructure work that needs to be done, and we're going to have to play catch up. So there's some things in there I feel we can eliminate, but based on all the feedback that we've heard, so Monday we've submitted some things, the city manager and staff responded to those things. You saw the changes today, and we'll continue to do that as we move forward, working towards that May approval. So again, I encourage everyone, if you have comments, specific comments, there's been a lot of suggestions. I've written them all down. If you have suggestions, or you think there's ways that we can identify reduce spending in our budget, please reach out and let me know, because that's certainly what we're striving for. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to the comments, but like anybody, I'm going to do it anyway, right? So I think it was helpful to hear everyone come out and give their feedback, and a couple of things struck me in comments I hear about the process, and were kind of presented as maybe not so great, but what I see is that, yeah, things have changed since Monday, and that's actually the reflective of the process working. And so that's what's supposed to happen, is that an idea is out there and a proposal is set out, and then we are listening to public comment and then incorporating changes. And as mentioned earlier, that's what we will continue to do. So this is the time, we're not adopting the budget today, we have a month to go. So this is the time to continue to reach out to us, and in addition to coming out and speaking today, but also emailing us with the thoughts and ideas and places that you see there could be change. And so I'm finding it incredibly helpful as we move forward and as we think about where we are today. And this proposal may not be what we ultimately adopt in May because of this process. And I agree, to continue to find places to trim spending, I think is incredibly important as we look at what else we could do from here. And then I think also in terms of the longer process about how do we even get to the place where we are now with respect to what priorities we set and what is important. And I just want to say that if anybody has, again, any comments or questions about how we develop the priorities and move forward, I really would encourage you. I would be happy to speak to anyone about that, or any group of people about that anytime, about how we continue to improve the way that we even get to the place that we even know what to put in and what we want to prioritize as a town. So I really thank all of you for being here. It's everybody knows I'm kind of geek about this. I'd like to see a full room. This is actually really great that you are here. And please do continue not just to show up today, but also to reach out to us, to talk to us individually or in groups of two, so that we can have really meaningful back and forth conversations about why things are the way they are and what's possible and what we can improve and what we can do better and how we can really listen to each other as we move forward in the process. So thanks.
Mr. Ramsey.
Thank you to my colleagues and comments, and I too appreciate everyone coming out, having lived in Williamsburg for quite some time and being of a certain category of age. I've seen a lot of changes over the years, and I think one thing for me that's important to realize is how much we on City Council have done to invigorate tourism through various events, and those events not only bring new tourists and visitors here, but they also provide an amenity for our residents. I think we sometimes forget that everything that is done to bring in visitors is also appreciated by residents, and I dare say all restaurateurs and businesses in the city want what's done for the city to also be applicable to county residents, because we all blend together. And I personally tend to pick the restaurants that I visit based on the menu, their location, and their experience that they provide. And I think that that's often the case with visitors when they come and with residents, and we have been fortunate to see a huge growth of those opportunities over the past couple of years. Based on what we've heard, and thanks everyone for their comments, particularly for suggestions, I do have a couple questions for the city manager. So one was, we've heard a suggestion to perhaps increase real estate taxes to offset the meals tax. So what would we need to increase real estate taxes by to offset the 1.5% or even 1% of the restaurant tax?
So the real estate tax this year would generate about $329,000 per penny. So you'd need 4 or 5 penny increase to be half a year's collection of the increased meals tax.
And you said half a year, and so that's one thing to remember, that this wouldn't go into effect until January of 2026.
That's right.
The other thing is, I think we all looked through the CIP, and like Vice Mayor Dent, we got this big book, and I went through and pulled out a lot of different things, and I think it's important to realize that some of the things we look like, oh, that's a good thing to eliminate or push forward, but we don't have the history for that. And one thing that I picked out was the Kiwanis tennis courts in terms of their resurfacing. And you responded saying that they have been patched to the point that we no longer get 6 months of use out of them before we have to do it again. So what might seem like a good savings actually probably is not because of having to redo them on a fairly regular basis. And I don't think that we want to not have those tennis courts available again for our residents. I also think that for people like me not super familiar with the CIP, to understand that if it has a carry forward but is not included in the CIP for 2026, that it's not actually an expenditure for 2026, that it's on our wish list per se.
Right, so future years, you mean?
For
So
future years.
27,
So it's-
28, 29, and 30, right?
Right, so it's to keep it sort of in our forefront, but it's not an allocation.
Right.
And when we talked about the Peacock Park, or the downtown children's park with a water feature, one of the things that we all talked about on Monday was the possibility of not doing it. You took that out of the budget, but again, it's not $3 million or $6 million out of the budget, because that's not what our expense would be for this year. Our expense for this year would just be the payment on the debt, which $270,000, I believe. The other thing that Vice Mayor Dent and I are both on the WPAC, and so we've been working for a community memorial for the African American Heritage Trail. We again talked on Monday about taking that out. And can you remind me where the money for the WPAC comes from?
It's from the Tourism Fund.
So that goes back to that fund, which can be used for other things. And it's also from the CIP. A certain percentage of that goes to the WPAC each month. So, and then as far as new employees, we've talked over the years about bolstering. I think, if I remember correctly, the majority of employees have been added to police and fire, because we were in dire need of that when I first joined council.
Yeah, if you look back since 2019, the vast majority of employees added have been added to human services, police, and fire.
And those requests for new employees, a lot of them were also from fire and police.
That's right.
And I also want to think about, a lot of the events and things that City Council has been very deliberate on, again, is to bring people here. If we look at the list of events that take place in the city, I would say it has expanded tremendously over the past number of years. And those events are funded in part by the city to help bring people in. One prime example to me right now is the Muscarelli. And if anyone who's not been to the Muscarelli for the exhibit, don't be like that. It's here, but I can always go next week, because sooner or later it's going to be gone, and it is something worth seeing. But we, the Tourism Contingency Fund, provided funding to them to bring people in. I have a friend flying in from Iowa next weekend. And while she's here, and while all of those people are here, they're going to eat out in restaurants, they're going to spend the night in hotels, and so they are going to spend money because of how we've invested in a tourism entity. The other thing is all of the other events that we've had, whether it be the Comic Festival, the Cat Festival, the holiday market, all of those things help bring people in. And one thing I heard from one of the contractors talking to recently is all of those things help change the mindset of people about what Williamsburg is and what we do. And I think it's important to remember that we have changed, and we need to continue investing to bring people in here. And if we don't have the funds to invest, then I think it'll be a different case. So I agree there's probably other ways to look at the budget, but I appreciate everyone's comments, and just want to say that, again, putting money in helps bring money from visitors who come here. So that's it.
Williams?
Well, I would like to start off and just thank everyone who came out and gave remarks. What you say at these meetings does not fall on deaf ears. as Vice Mayor Dent mentioned, I was over here writing down everything that was said today, and this is great because we'll go back and see where we can make necessary changes. You know, I believe that businesses are truly the backbone of the city, and I would like to just take a moment to recognize and honor just all that you contribute to the city of Williamsburg as well. I shared this on Monday, but as a city council and as a community in a broader sense, we have the utmost responsibility to be fiscally responsible. And this includes the beauty of this time period we have before the budget is adopted in May, is that we can think creatively of how can we solve these issues without placing the burden on members of our community. So I just encourage each and every one of you, if you have ideas, there were so many great ideas that were shared today. If you have ideas, to email us, to give us a phone call. Let's work collaboratively to see the Williamsburg that we not just want to see today, but also 40 years down the line. So thank you.
Well, and thank each of you for those comments, and particularly Ms. Ramsey and Ms. Williams. We talk about, tend to look at the budget myopically. There's so much in this budget that makes Williamsburg what it is and so special, that helps drive visitation. And so, you know, if we start to make cuts, how does that affect the experience here in Williamsburg? And then what does that collateral damage do to your business? And so, you know, we want to try to invest, but at the same time be respectful of the burden that the taxes put on you. You know, I hope that you believe that you're not in business alone. We're all in this together in this little town, and Williamsburg is challenged, and it's heavily service oriented, and we put a lot of effort into making investments to drive visitation to your business, so that your businesses are successful, so that the city's successful, and it's really a symbiotic relationship. So that said, you know, if there's an opportunity to make some additional cuts to save some of the tax burdens that your customers may feel, we're certainly going to try to do that. So, any other comments? Okay, so that concludes that public hearing. Again, hope to see you in between now and May. Item D is a public hearing regarding the proposed FY26 effective real estate tax levy. Mr. Trivette.
I don't have anything new to offer.
Okay. So moves then to reports.
Mr. Mayor, you have to open the public hearing.
Oh, okay. All right. My apologies. I expected you to say something about the real estate tax, and you did. Okay. Would anybody like to come and speak on item D, the tax levy of real estate? See everybody heading in the other direction. You know, I have to, Ms. Ramsey, you kind of brought up the point about real estate tax rates, and I think, you know, we have tried to make sure, given the increased assessments that people have been seeing in their homes, not to burden them either anymore. Is there an appetite to look at raising the real estate tax rate?
I mean, we talked about this in the beginning, and Mr. Trivette pointed out 1 penny equals $329,000. That's a lot of pennies to get us where we need to be. So obviously, I think it was 5 cents just to cover the increase in the funding request for the schools. So to look at a real estate tax increase in addition to a water rate increase, we looked at all those options. We talked about trash collection and recycling. I just didn't think, for me, that was going to generate the revenue we needed to make to have a balanced budget.
Yeah, and I think it brings to mind that with the population of Williamsburg and the amount of taxpayers in our city, that making a change of 1 cent is not the change that occurs when you have a population, say James City County, that can generate a lot of revenue in that regard. And one of the things we have also always talked about is that, as we have heard from the restaurateurs and the businesses, is that they also pay real estate taxes on their businesses. And so by looking at other ways that would impact, that would generate revenue from both residents and visitors, has felt to be a better means of increasing revenue.
Okay, with that, I'll open the public hearing if anybody would like to come forward and speak on the real estate tax levy. Mr. Wilson.
My name is Robert Wilson, 22 The Palisades. I just want to point out, we talked a lot about the tax rate of 62 cents per thousand is the lowest in Virginia cities. But what we don't talk about is that, taxes are really a function of tax rate times the appraised value. When you look at the median tax bill that city residents pay, we rank in the top 21% of all 134 jurisdictions in the state. So I wouldn't get overly fixated with the low tax rate, but keep in mind that the tax bill itself is pretty high given, the appraised values in the city. And increasing the rate, makes it that much more difficult for people to afford housing in the city. And that combined with the water rate increase, we're trying to encourage affordable housing. You're just putting an additional burden on people and making it that much more unaffordable. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, I'll close the public hearing. Any further comments from council? Okay, now we'll move on to reports. First is the finance report presentation. Ms. Dameron. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. There we go. Again, I'm going to start with our property taxes. Right now, our real estate tax rate won't change, or tax revenue won't change much until the next due date, the 1st of June. But we are at 51% of budget compared to 52% of budget last year. And then on our personal property tax revenue, we are at 97.9% of budget compared to 99.6% last year. And these don't always come in even. So I think both of those we can anticipate meeting budget. With business property tax, we are at 105% of budget, and we were at 105% of budget last year, so that's trending along. We did meet our budget last year, and I expect to do the same this year. On our room tax year to date, we were at 60% in '24, and then we are at 61% this year. Oddly enough, last year, we were just shy of 35,000 meeting budget, and this year, we're just over 35,000 trending. So I think we're going to meet that budget. Our meals year to date, we're at 65%. We were at 66% this time last year. We did exceed our budget last year. Our budget was $8,680,000 in '24, and we came in at $8,953,000. And so our budget for the current year is just a little bit over $9 million, about $9,200,000. However, on our 1% sales tax, we are at 58% of budget. We are at 63% in '24. But we did come in over our budget in '24. We came in at $5,939,000. Our budget for this year is $6,067,000. If the trend that we're on right now continues, I would anticipate finishing the year at $6 million, slightly under budget. So we'll continue to watch that. And then on our lodging, our $2 lodging revenue, We're at 63% of budget. Last year, the same time, we were at 61% of budget. Right now, we're trending about 3.3% ahead of budget. And so I think we're in good shape there. We'll hope that continues. And then the historic sales tax, we're at 58.5% of budget right now. Last year, we were at 68.6%. We're trending almost 3%, about 2.8% below budget. Again, that's been a trend we've seen for a while. We'll continue to watch that as well. Now, this next slide's kind of busy, and I'm happy to talk to any degree, but I think I'll abbreviate. Maybe next time we'll put some points on here with some numbers. But this is our business property professional license and occupational license by category. And the red dot that you see on each category is where we are at the end of March. The other lines, the green line is where the trend line from March to June 30th for each year. So the green line is 24, the purple line is 23, and I put up 2019 just as an illustration of the last year before we, because 20 and 21, 22 are a little weird. And you'll notice in each one that red dot, with the exception of the retail sales, is below where we were in 24 at this time. And I have the numbers for where we were at that time for each line and where we ended. It may be a little too much information at the moment, but it kind of gives you an idea where we might be headed. And one of them, I will speak to contracting because I was really worried about that earlier in the year. And although we were at $555,000 at the end of March on a budget of $609,000, I did peak. And as of yesterday, we're at $726,000. So we're going to be okay in that category. What I will do that might be more meaningful to you at the moment is I did show the trend line for all of them combined. And I will share that the red dot that represents where we were at the end of March for the combined B poll was $2,446,000. Now, in 24 at March, we were at $2,732,000, ending the year at $3,060,000. The purple line, which represents 23, at March we were at $2,305,000, and at June we were at $2,638,000. And in 2019, in March that year, we were at $2,174,000, ending the year with $2,330,000. If I look at where we were at March and where we ended the year, the average would be somewhere at March we were around 90%. That doesn't always hold true, but just a general average. And if that being the case, I would anticipate that we could come in under budget as much as $300,000, but trend lines sometimes, in government, it doesn't always follow the same path. So we will continue to monitor that. It is not unusual for us to continue to collecting between the due date of March 1st on through the end of the year. So we will continue to monitor that and keep you updated on that. And then this is our meals, lodging, sales tax revenue. We've been over this before. I just continue to keep this in the packet as a reminder, and we're showing 2019 through 2024. And the same thing with our real estate and personal property tax. That concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or receive any comments.
Thank you, Ms. Dameron. A lot of good information there. Hopefully we get these trend lines going up. And we, obviously, we all recognize the uncertainty and the feeling in the general marketplace and consumer confidence and what have you. Although yesterday was a great day in the stock market. But that just a demonstration of the uncertainty. So hopefully through our efforts and we can finish the year where we need to. I don't have any questions.
Yeah,
Vice
thank you,
Mayor?
Ms. Dameron. I have no questions.
No questions for me either. Thank you.
No questions, thank you.
All right. Anybody for monthly departmental operating reports, Mr. Trivette?
We're going to hear from the planning department.
Welcome, Davey. Ms. Griffin.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons and members of City Council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of the Planning and Coast Compliance Department. I'd like to take just a few minutes to walk you through the planning and review process, what happens when someone wants to subdivide property in the city, make changes to the subdivision or the zoning ordinance, or start construction or development in the city. The Planning and Coast Compliance Department is divided into two divisions. It's Planning and Zoning and Building and Coast Compliance. And as a team, we work to ensure that development in our city aligns with regulations, local, state, and federal, and that our plans are approved community goals and adjust with the long-term vision. The first thing that I thought was important to do is to just talk about a few foundational principles. And the first is the Dillon Rule. As everyone probably knows, the Commonwealth of Virginia is a Dillon Rule state, meaning local governments have only three types of power: those granted in express words, those necessarily or fairly implied in or incident to the powers especially granted, and those essential to the declared objects and purposes of the corporation. Pretty much, if the Code of Virginia says we can do it, then we can. If it doesn't, we cannot. In the Code of Virginia, there's also a section titled 15.2 entitled Counties, Cities, and Towns, and this outlines the intent and authority of the functions of local government. And for this presentation, I'll just talk about a few that are particular to the planning department. The first is the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance is in this chapter 15.2. The authority is given for a zoning ordinance in this chapter. Also, the authority for a subdivision ordinance, a comprehensive plan. 15.2 outlines the function and duty of the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals. 15.2 also speaks to the requirements of public hearings when it regards to land use related requests, how these cases are advertised, when we post for those cases, and how the announcements are put in the paper and throughout the city. The first type of request that I'll go through is a subdivision request. And dependent on the number of lots that are asked to be subdivided, depends on the process that will be used. And so this first process here is a boundary line adjustment or a minor subdivision. And this request is simply a change to the boundary lines of a property, or a request to decrease the number of lots, or it's a request to subdivide no more than 5 lots. This is an administrative process, and this simply means that it takes place in the planning department. It is reviewed by planning staff, police, fire, and engineering staff. It does not go through the planning commission or the city council. The next type of subdivision is what we call a preliminary plan or a concept plan. It's a review of the subdivision design. And a preliminary plan, the first type is if it's between 6 to 49 lots. In this particular category, the subdivision ordinance does give an option of it to be administratively approved or go through a public meeting through the Planning Commission. There is a larger subdivision plan, and that's also called a preliminary plan, but between 50 lots or more, this is a required public meeting. A public meeting at the Planning Commission level and the City Council level, which requires a public hearing. Something important to remember is that property owners do have property rights. So property owners have the right to subdivide their land. If the land division meets the subdivision ordinance and also meets zoning requirements, denial of the request can be considered a taking of the property. We then move on to a development plan. A development plan considers the conformance of a development to applicable regulations, and these include but are not limited to stormwater management, engineering, fire codes, police codes, zoning codes, and transportation. This is not an administrative process, and it's similar to a site plan. It outlays everything that would be under the ground and above the ground as far as lighting, anything like that. And this is a public meeting before the Planning Commission. It is a public meeting before the Planning Commission, but it's not a public hearing. A public hearing is only required if there is a substantial change to the concept plan in this particular situation. Now, looking at zoning-related requests, we have a special use permit, a text amendment, and a rezoning. A special use permit comes before the Planning Commission and the City Council. A text amendment, which is any change to the language in the zoning ordinance or the subdivision ordinance, also comes before the Planning Commission and City Council through public hearings. And then a rezoning, of course, is a change of a zoning classification for a property. It's also the official change of a zoning map, and now those also go through the Planning Commission through a public hearing and City Council public hearing. The last thing is a site plan. I should note that a site plan is normally an administrative function in most Virginia localities. However, the city is special, and so we do have site plans go through the Planning Commission in a public meeting. It's not a public hearing, but it is a public meeting. Again, this is the engineered drawings showing the placement of utilities, roads, and anything else that you can think of that would be involved in the development of property. This just simply gives you a diagram of what happens. We usually have a pre-application meeting. A prospective applicant contacts the Planning and Codes Compliance Department to introduce their request. And so the city is not soliciting someone to come in, but they are actually calling the city and asking for them to actually be able to do some development. That process is then reviewed. The application is submitted. There's an internal review, and again, this is through the Planning Department, Engineering, Police, and Fire. And then there is a completion of that internal review. This is for a subdivision, if you remember that minor subdivision, and so that plat is recorded at the circuit clerk of the courts, and then that process is complete. If it's not an administrative process, we still go through the pre-application meeting. The application is submitted, and we have an internal review. That internal review can take up to months. It can take a year, depending on the type of plan that is submitted to us and how long it takes the engineer to make all the changes that we require them to make. We then are required by the local ordinance to post signs. Posting of signs is not required in the, specifically required in the Code of Virginia, but it does say that the city or locality is allowed to do various types of announcements, and so we have chosen to post signs. Posting of signs is what we do here. Advertising in local newspapers is required by the Code of Virginia, and sending letters to adjacent property owners is also required by the Code of Virginia. We then have a site plan review committee meeting. This is 4 members of the Planning Commission. They meet to review the site plan along with the engineer, and then a Planning Commission meeting, and then we also advertise in the local newspaper once again for a City Council public hearing if that particular application requires that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. That was very quick, but hopefully it got you to the point.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin.
Yes.
Very quick and certainly a lot of information.
Yes.
And those that aren't wonky about planning and codes, it's certainly a lot.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that did strike me, and I would ask you to go back to it.
Yes.
When you refer to a taking of property, can you go through that?
Yep. That's,
Go through that part
oh,
again?
yes. So what that simply means is people have property rights, the owner has property rights. So if they want to subdivide the property, and if their subdivision meets the zoning ordinance requirements, and if it meets the subdivision requirements, then we would have to approve that subdivision. Now, approving of the subdivision does not mean that there's approval of the site plan. The site plan still has to go through the planning commission. It still has to be reviewed by the engineer, by stormwater management. All those things still have to happen, but the actual subdivision of the property, dividing those lots, if you have one lot, dividing them into 2 or dividing them into 12, if they meet those subdivision and zoning ordinance requirements as far as setbacks and the size of the lot, then we would have to approve that subdivision.
Gotcha. Otherwise, that is to take, if we don't approve it,
Yes.
we're essentially taking that right away from them.
That right away from them to be able to subdivide. Again, we still have a site plan that we have to review, and it doesn't mean the site plan is going to be approved.
Gotcha. Good, thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Really good information, and hopefully the people in the audience and those watching found it helpful as well. I did have one question, just because it recently came up at the Planning Commission.
Okay.
For a development that, I guess it had a development plan since 2005, but the Planning Commission was tasked with determining whether it was significant change or a minor change. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so you're referring to Redoubt Ridge.
Yes, ma'am.
And Quarter Path, and the preliminary plan would fall under this bottom preliminary plan there, a conceptual plan, and it requested 470 townhouses, single-family detached, and condominiums. They submitted a development plan, this plan here. And in reviewing the development plan, one thing that the subdivision ordinance says is if the development plan is substantially different from the preliminary plan, then it can either be decided by the planning director, myself, or it can be decided, I can opt out to then give it to the planning commission to review, to determine if it needed to be kicked back to the city council because it was substantially different. There are 4 criteria that we had to use to judge if it was substantially different. There were 4 criteria. I felt that which I think it was did it meet the general character of the development plan, the approved development plan. I thought that could be up for question, and so therefore I gave it to the Planning Commission to make that ultimate decision. And so 1 was a conceptual plan of 470 units, and their development plan had 198 single-family detached units. The Planning Commission agreed that this was not a substantial change, it was still residential, and so that development plan is moving forward in the process and did not come back to City Council.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that, because that was a little bit of a unique situation where the plan changed, but it's, as you stated, it still remained residential, which was the intent of the original development plan.
Correct. And it decreased the number of lots, which was substantial, and usually you don't have that. You have an increase of lots.
Right.
But it went from 470 to 198.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for this presentation. This was incredibly helpful. And, for me, I do get questions a lot from members of the community about the planning process, and I am a little wonky about it. So I really appreciate this time that you're taking. And I wondered if you could go back one slide. In the preliminary plan, it says administrative public meeting optional. Whose option? Who optional to who?
Yes, so this is in the subdivision ordinance, and it says that the option is for staff to just review it internally, or staff can then say, you know what, I think this needs to be reviewed by the planning commission.
Okay. Now, and then my other question is one of timing. So you explained the process by which, from an internal, meeting, and then does the Code of Virginia tell us how quickly these things need to happen, or are there trigger points? Because that's another question that kind of comes up sometimes that community members want to know is, how quickly or slowly, or who's in control of the timing of things a lot of times?
Yes, so some things are outlined in the Code of Virginia, others are not. So once we receive the plan, the department has a certain number of days to provide comments to the applicant. And once the Planning Commission receives that application, I believe it's 100 days that the Planning Commission has to make a decision. When it comes to the City Council, that regulation is not put on the City Council to have a certain amount of days. There are a number of days where the advertisements are required. That's outlined in the Code of Virginia. We have to advertise at least 2 weeks in advance, and some of those advertisements has changed. It used to be, it had to be so many days prior to the meeting, no more than this many days in between, and so we look at that very closely to make sure that we're following that. But outside of that, there is no other requirement.
Okay, thank you very much.
Except for site plans, which are 60 days.
Yeah.
And there is a change in the Code of Virginia to reduce that to 45 days.
Right, and so I mean, I do think it's important, kind of just in recognizing that, you know, there are a lot of requirements that do get very detailed and particular to different types of plans, and so it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of process, because it really does depend on what exactly is being proposed, like what does the Code of Virginia tell us we have to do vis-a-vis all of these different types of requirements. So it really can get very nuanced in the process, depending on what the applicant is bringing forth to the city. So I appreciate like the level of detail in all of your work, and not just in the substance of what one may be bringing forth, but also procedurally what the requirements are. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I will add on to this. I'm just telling you what our requirements are from a planning and zoning. Engineering has other requirements. So when they're looking at a site plan, they actually have more days than we in the planning office have to approve their portion.
Right, that's a really great point. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the information, and I think I would probably find this helpful to refer back to. Is this something that could be made available, or
yes, we can
put on the agenda, put it on the website?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Good idea.
Well, thank you for the presentation. As everyone mentioned, it was very helpful, especially because it is a subject that you can get lost in the logistics very easily. So thank you for your time today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Griffin, we appreciate you coming forward.
You're welcome.
Mr. City Manager, any report?
I just wanted to point out, I don't know if you all saw it or missed it, if I can get my computer to come back up, that one of our own was recognized this week. The Deputy Voter Registrar, Haley Snapp, was recognized as the standout local election official for her work with William & Mary students. And really, if you haven't seen the articles on the city's website, we pushed it out as a news blast. It's a really important recognition. And, you know, it's an office that we don't spend enough time talking about, with a critical function. And to have somebody recognized on this level is really a value to the organization.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. City Attorney?
Nothing.
Takes us now to another open forum. If anybody would like to come forward and speak. Welcome back.
Robert Wilson, 22 The Palisades. So many of us in the community really thought that the planning process that was outlined by Mrs. Griffin was the open and transparent process. And we've learned that that's not the case. Through our information searches over the last couple of years, in my opinion, we've learned that the process is corrupted by your own ex parte communications with developers and stakeholders outside the public view. Ex parte communications are one-on-one communications with parties where it's outside the public view, either through email, meetings, or discussions. And what we've learned is that the proper ex parte communication is one in which you do fact-finding, seek information, ask questions, and receive feedback from your constituencies. What's an improper and unethical ex parte communication is where you engage in a mutual exchange of non-public information, where you provide encouragement outside the public venue, and when you're going through the process, all before those projects are placed for rulemaking in front of a public body. So when you have developers seeking you out before they submit their rezoning applications, and you engage in a discussion or a meeting with them and exchange non-public information or give them encouragement, ethically, that's not appropriate. You know, when you have Colonial Williamsburg seeking you out before they rezone a particular property and want to have breakfast or lunch and present non-public information to you, you can't treat that as confidential information if it has a bearing on the decision-making process that is going to be before you. So the whole process of ex parte communication has kind of corrupted this open and transparent process that we all believe in. And I think that the solution to it is for you to adopt an ex parte communication policy for the city that kind of limits your communications outside the public realm when you engage in these one-on-one discussions. So that's my response with respect to the Ms. Griffin's presentation. I guess I misinterpreted the agenda on the water rate increase and missed my opportunity there. So I'll briefly talk about, as for the rate increase, you know, at the budget retreat, the city suggested that the water rate increase could triple over the next 10 years. We saw disclosed a 30% increase, but there was no indication to the public that, in fact, rates could continue to increase to pay for the improvements. You know, I'm not suggesting we don't make the improvements, but I'm suggesting that we make it open and transparent about that there are prospects for future substantial rate increases in the future. I also am a real proponent for a tiered structure for rate increases. You know, these rate increases are really like progressive taxes. They fall hardest on those people who can ill afford it, right? And so we should have a tiered rate increase where there's a lower rate for lower water use customers, a higher rate for those higher water use customers to encourage conservation among that group. Also, last June, the council approved a resolution to extend the payment to Newport News of approximately $18 million to give you time to look at the water supply issue. You know, as I've explained in the past, my biggest issue with the city is the lack of openness and transparency with respect to major issues that impact its residents. So you have an $18 million payment under this agreement with Newport News is due June 30th, and you've said absolutely nothing about it in the budget, right? So presumably you're going to renegotiate it, you're going to make it disappear, put it out over a period of time, or allow 1 million gallons per day supply to lapse. Well, that's pretty important information to residents, and it's nowhere in the budget discussion. Whatever you decide to do is up to you. But my point is, make it open and transparent to what the issue is for city residents, so that when we learn in June what you've decided, it's not a surprise. So the final issue I think I have kind of raised this morning. There are a number of, as we said, I think, capital improvement projects from last year that are carried forward to this year. My understanding under the budget guidelines is that funds are encumbered but not spent yet, and that they will be spent in the future, in some cases requiring future approval. So I did submit a list of those totaling, I think, $20 or so million of projects that you could cancel, right, and bring back into the city funds, and therefore avoid some of the tax increases on meals and other taxes that you heard so much about today. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson. Anybody else like to come forward? Seeing none, I'll close the open forum, and we'll move on to unfinished business. And first is consideration and approval of a PPEA interim agreement with Horrigan Construction Corporation regarding the design and construction of the Williamsburg Library. Ms. Shelton.
So before you is a PPEA interim agreement. This is the first agreement that we enter into with a potential contractor. Generally, what these do is the contractor is given a certain amount of money to create 35% construction drawings. And from that 35% construction drawing, they're able to provide us with a guaranteed maximum price. And with that guaranteed maximum price, City Council then decides whether or not they want to enter into a comprehensive agreement for that contractor to build the building. This agreement is broken into two phases. So that's different than previous iterations of this that we've done for police and fire. Phase 1 of this agreement is a public input process that Horrigan Construction will run for the city to talk about design, siting the library on the site, making sure that the library has all of the facilities that it needs. At the end of Phase 1, which will cost approximately $27,000, City Council will then need to give a notice to proceed to Phase 2. Phase 2 of this agreement is the typical 35% construction drawing. So this is slightly different than other PPEA interim agreements that you've seen. Total value for the work in this agreement is $1.123 million, which would be paid to the contractor as progress payments. The work has to be performed in accordance with the standards in the industry and according to the schedules that are attached to the agreement, along with the schedule of values that's attached to the agreement. Happy to answer any questions that you might have about the agreement, and we can proceed from there.
I don't know that I have any questions about the agreement, but in this agreement, it's an opportunity. There's, as I understand it, part of what Horrigan will do moving forward is have community stakeholder meetings.
That's right. That's Phase 1.
Right. And in that, and I guess the elephant in the room is how much library are we going to build, since James City County has reneged, indicated that they are not going to contribute to the downtown library. So that changes our funding model, and it changes the amount of funds that we'll have available. So that process will unfold and allow that conversation to happen so that we don't build more library than we necessarily wish to afford.
That's correct.
Yeah, just so I'm clear, Ms. Shelton, because you said this is different, so the only thing we're committing to today is the Phase 1, the $27,000 for the public input.
So the agreement is for the full $1.23 million, but there is a provision in the agreement that provides that they cannot proceed to Phase 2 until the city gives them permission to proceed. So we have to provide them with a written notice to proceed. So it gives an opportunity for City Council to pause, decide whether or not they want to proceed with this interim agreement before they move on to actually doing the work.
Yeah, and I think that's important because with public input can change, as the mayor's indicated, contributions from, or lack of contributions from our partners can change the whole project. So at least we have the opportunity to pause after we learn more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to follow up on the idea of a pause, after Phase 1, public input process, given the mayor's point that there's a lot of moving parts here, and we recognize that. Nobody is, under any delusion that there aren't a lot of moving parts to this very important project. But after Phase 1, if we're like, pause, we're not sure if we want to proceed, we can say we do not want to proceed?
That's correct. This agreement can be terminated for convenience.
I see. Okay, that is an important point. Thank you very much.
Thank you for describing it. I think those of us who have been following the desire for a new library, in fact, I think I mentioned on Monday, it's been on the CIP list for probably 10 years. I think this is a great way for us to continue moving that project forward without committing ourselves to a large amount of funding. So I'm glad to see that we have that option and opportunity.
Yes, thank you for the information presented in this agreement. I did have one clarifying question as well. Just to clarify, Phase 1 and 2, or Phase 2 will take place right after Phase 1, so it won't be done conjunctively, is that correct?
That's right. So they're going to do Phase 1, which is the public input sessions and community meetings and meetings with stakeholders. At that point, they cannot proceed to Phase 2 until the city provides them with a written notice to proceed. So they will not proceed until they receive that from the city.
Thank you. I have one more question in regards to the public meetings. Do we have an idea of how many will be held?
So I think that's a good question. The idea here is that Horgan, if you all approve this today, the next step will be for Horgan to reconvene with the evaluation committee and present their concept of what a public meeting should be, and then have a conversation with the evaluation committee about what they want the public meetings to be. And I think through that process, we'll define how many and location and all of that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Somebody like to make a motion?
Yeah, it looked like, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just wanted
Sorry.
to add, as a member of the evaluation committee, I think it's important that this won't be Oregon's first time
Right.
at a development that they're trying to encourage the public to participate in the process and setting up those types of meetings. So they have some experience as well.
Yeah, they're very prepared to provide a lot of information and props and facilitate a good conversation and input, feedback.
Yeah, by all means, I think the developer of this project wants this to be a signature piece for Williamsburg, and so I think they're looking forward to engaging the community.
So I move that City Council authorize the city manager to execute the interim agreement for the design of the Williamsburg Library with Horrigan Construction Corporation.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Ms. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Takes us to new business, and first is consideration and action regarding the proposed resolution 25-04, authorizing the issuance of a general obligation bonds refunding bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $11,500,000 and providing for the form and details thereof.
Yes.
Ms. Dameron.
These are to refund some bonds that we issue for the police station. And we're asking to do that at an amount not to exceed the $11,500,000 or a true interest cost not exceeding 5%. It authorizes us to proceed either through the Virginia Resource Authority or one or more banks, either through a competitive or negotiated sale. It does not bind us if conditions aren't favorable. However, it does authorize either the city manager or myself to act should the conditions, in coordination with our financial advisor, should the conditions be suitable. And I will note that we have Jimmy Sanderson with Davenport here with us to answer any questions, as well as Kevin White with Butler Snow, who's our bond attorney. Jimmy's our financial advisor.
So essentially, we want to look at the opportunity to refinance this $11.5 million that ultimately would save the city of Williamsburg.
Yes, and these do have some a call provision, and so we're trying to look at that at a known rate, as opposed to having 30 days, maybe when the conditions aren't as favorable.
Yeah, no question. It just makes sense to look at the opportunity to save some money.
I agree. I mean, it's just like any homeowner, when the rates are more favorable, you look to refinance your mortgage, and so we're trying to take advantage of an opportunity.
Somebody like to make a motion?
So I move that City Council approve Resolution 25-04 to authorize the issuance of general obligation refunding bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $11,500,000.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. McKay?
Ms. Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Okay. Next is the consideration and appointment of the Williamsburg Poet Laureate, Ms. Grabala. I know there's some people in the audience who have been waiting a long time.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons, members of City Council. I know that the program policy was just approved last month, so I'm not going to go into too much depth here, but I did want to provide a brief overview before getting to the recommendation. Again, this concept began a little over a year ago, where the idea of a poet laureate was brought to the city, where it was then given to the Williamsburg Public Art Council for consideration. The WPAC and staff researched other localities to draft a program including criteria and a timeline, with FY26 being the starting point for the position.
The WPAC initiated a selection process to identify candidates and receive submissions. From those, we narrowed it down to 2 finalists. The finalists were then interviewed by the WPAC. They were asked to read 2 poems, one of their choosing, which had been written within the past year, and then another based on a prompt given to them by the WPAC. Again, City Council approved the policy last month. And then just last week, WPAC met to conduct its final deliberations for making a recommendation. It will be a 2-year term beginning July 1 of this year and ending on June 30th of 2027. Before you are the opportunities and deliverables. Create at least 2 original works on behalf of the city, present a reading of their original inaugural poem, work with the WPAC to create and execute a project during their tenure. This was something that they had written a proposal or brief proposal in their submission. Help build networks and opportunities for poets and other literary, performing, and/or visual artists to create and engage new audiences, and then present additional readings at events mutually agreed upon by the city and the WPAC. So, after discussion, the WPAC voted unanimously to recommend LaCroix Nixon for the inaugural appointment for Williamsburg Poet Laureate. LaCroix grew up in Williamsburg. He currently serves as the Regional Director of Teen Programs for the YMCA. He has been writing and performing spoken word poetry for the past 8 years. He is a member of the Poetry Society of Virginia and is on the executive board for the Writers Guild of Virginia. He's also the founder of Slam Connection, a local nonprofit organization that uses poetry as a means for community action. And in its 2 years of operation, Slam Connection has created an extensive curriculum. They hold open mics and workshops, and they've created partnerships with the library and other local institutions. The WPAC is excited to recommend LaCroix for this position and looks forward to working with him over the next 2 years. And if there are any questions, I'll bring it back to LaCroix.
Well, I'll turn to our WPAC committee members if they want to talk about that. Any questions?
Yeah, no questions. Just like to say that, we were fortunate that we had a number of qualified candidates, which was exciting. And obviously, we had one candidate that stood out to the group. The group put a lot of hard work and conversation into making a choice, so congratulations to Mr. Nixon, and look forward to working with you. But it was a great process, and just look forward to the opportunities to present as indicated in the program.
And the only thing I'll add is that over the past couple of years, we found that the WPAC really does get into a project, and we talk about it, and we look at ways to advance public art in all different forms across the city. And I think I speak for the vice mayor in that it's been a really enjoyable committee to be on and see the progress that we're making.
Well, and I'd just like to express my gratitude to Mr. Nixon for bringing this opportunity to us, and then ultimately congratulations on being accepted as Williamsburg's Poet Laureate. First inaugural. Why don't you stand up for the people in the audience and wave. Thank you, sir. Welcome. I understand you'll be at every city council meeting to read a poem. So long as you go first, right? Not to wait. Mr. Kernchier?
Yeah, I'm just incredibly thrilled. And I remember last month when we spoke about this, we talked about how we've talked about a lot of things today, right? Gone through a lot today, and will continue every month, to bring forth and talk about things that impact our community. And we talk about all kinds of things, and people bring a lot of things to the table, and sometimes there can be uncomfortable moments, and that's just part of it. And I think, though, what this really lands us and brings us back to is how the power of art to not necessarily always make everybody agree, but at least we can all appreciate the beauty that art can take in so many forms. And I'm so excited that the community now we will have the expression of art, in this way, and with you as our inaugural Poet Laureate. So thank you for being here and stepping forward in this way and giving us the privilege of what I'm sure is going to be in the future, listening and learning from your art. So thank you very much.
I would also like to thank you. You know, art is truly one of the things that makes Williamsburg so special and unique. So thank you for your service, and it's an honor to have you as our first Poet Laureate.
So I move that City Council appoint LaCroix Nixon as the Williamsburg Poet Laureate to serve a 2-year term beginning July 1, 2025.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Ms. Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
Mayor Pons.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent.
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier.
Aye.
Congratulations. Okay, on to consideration and authorization to execute a performance agreement with AV Adventure Productions for the Ampersand International Arts Festival in FY25 and FY26. Ms. Grabala.
Prior to being awarded the three-year contract, or the three-year round event management services contract for FY24, 25, and 26, AV Adventure received outside agency funding from the city to offset costs for the Ampersand International Arts Festival, formerly known as the William & Mary Global Film Festival. For FY24, the city merged Ampersand into this contract, the year-round management services contract with AV Adventure, at that time using $268,000 in ARPA funds. AV Adventure continued to submit outside agency funding requests for the total services, including Ampersand for FY25 and 26. The FY25 request was approved and adopted in the budget. Because Ampersand is a signature event for the city, staff believes it warrants a dedicated performance agreement for FY25 and 26 with annual funding of $250,000 aligning with their outside agency funding request. So today we ask that you authorize the city manager to execute this dedicated performance agreement for Ampersand. Well, any questions?
Well, I think the efforts that, or the results that we saw in last year's production of Ampersand Arts Festival was successful. I think we all recognize it got a little bigger and better, so looking forward to it. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, no questions. Ready to move forward.
No questions, thank you.
No questions, and as an alum of William & Mary, I do want to say that I think that this event in particular really helps bring back William & Mary alums to see a Williamsburg that they never expected to see or experience when they were here. So, and I really appreciate the way that it has expanded and across the board with so many different, again, art forms. And so I'm prepared to vote for this as well.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
I would like to make a motion.
So I move that City Council authorize the city manager to execute a performance agreement with AV Adventure Productions for the Ampersand International Arts Festival for FY25 and FY26 in the annual amounts of $250,000, subject to annual appropriation of funds by City Council.
Second.
Ms. McKay, please.
Ms. Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
Mayor Pons.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent.
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier.
Aye.
Okay, next is consideration and action regarding proposed resolution number 25-05, amending the budget for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025. Ms. Dameron.
Hello again.
Oh.
And this is, we received a little more money than we were anticipating in the budget for a little grant. We're requesting to appropriate those funds as well as the expenditure. And we received a FEMA reimbursement of $69,577 for aid that the fire department gave to Virginia Beach. And we're requesting to appropriate that revenue as well as to reimburse the expenditure.
I have no questions.
Yeah, no questions.
Straightforward.
Is there a motion?
So I move that City Council approve Resolution 25-05 to appropriate grants and reimbursements received.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Ms. Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
Mayor Pons.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent.
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier.
Aye.
Next is item E, consideration and appointments to boards and commissions. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yes. I move that City Council appoint Middleton Smith to the Williamsburg Farmers Market Advisory Board to fill an unexpired term effective immediately and ending June 30, 2028.
Second?
Ms. McKay?
Ms. Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
Mayor Pons.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent.
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher.
Aye.
We have no closed sessions. Is that correct? All right. Leads us to the final agenda item is adjournment. Would somebody like to?
Before we do, I
Okay.
would like to follow up on something that I mentioned on Monday when we talked about trying to find some funds for CDR, and I wanted to see if you've been able to work some magic in that regard.
Yes, what we did is we added $25,000 to the operating budget to accommodate at 10% of their total request to the city. So that's in the current version of the proposed budget.
Thank you. And hopefully the other communities and localities that they contacted will be able to participate as well. And one last thing, we talked in your budget amendment, so to speak, you mentioned something about admissions tax exemptions.
Yeah, I forgot to cover that in the budget report, but what we did is the admissions tax, we left it at 10%, but we included an exemption for charitable organizations and museums that would cap their taxable value at $25. So if you're buying a ticket that's $30, you're still only going to pay tax on $25.
So it'd be $2.50.
That's right.
And so those would be like 501c3s, and I assume that they need to submit a
Right. The way that most localities handle those types of exemptions are application-based, so the burden is on the applicant to prove that they qualify.
Okay, thank you. I had seen that and just wanted to be sure it was clarified.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because, that was yet another adjustment that we were able to achieve by making some of the cuts that we all made to the CIP.
So now I will make a move for adjournment.
Thank you. Ms. McKay?
Ms. Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
Mayor Pons.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent.
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher.
Thank you. We're adjourned.